Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the confirmation vote on the Kindred nomination begin following my remarks.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Madam President, I rise today in support of the vote that the Senate's going to take here in a few minutes on Joshua Kindred to be Alaska's next federal district court judge. And I commend this body, particularly Leader McConnell, for prioritizing putting good, solid, young federal judges in seats in districts and circuit courts all across the country, 188 so far since the Trump administration took office. And now it's Alaska's turn. That federal judge seat that we're looking at filling here in a couple minutes has been empty for almost 4 years. And in our state, in the great state of Alaska, we don't have too many opportunities for federal judges. For example, Alaska only has one active judge on the entire Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals out of 29 active judges. So this is an important vote, certainly for my state. And I want to talk a little bit about Josh Kindred. I've known Josh since he was a young assistant district attorney for the state of Alaska when I was Attorney General. We talked about how we were going to work together to make Alaska's judicial process more efficient, more effective for Alaskans during his confirmation process. I certainly was impressed then, but I was impressed when I first met Josh many years ago and continue to be impressed with his fierce commitment to upholding the law, the concept of equal access to justice for all, and his keen awareness of Alaska's unique legal landscape. Josh had was unanimously rated as qualified by the ABA and is a lifelong Alaskan with a broad and impressive legal background. As I mentioned, after clerking on the Oregon Supreme Court, he came back home to Alaska and was promoted to the violent crimes supervisor after a number of years working in the Anchorage District Attorney's Office, where he worked to punish perpetrators of crimes and victims of some of the heinous crimes, unfortunately, that we have in too high numbers in Alaska, particularly as it relates to sexual assault and domestic violence. His career, he has been committed not only prosecuting those kind of crimes, but doing pro bono work to stem this very significant crisis that my state has with these heinous crimes of sexual abuse. Rounding out his legal experience, Josh served as the environmental counsel for the Alaska Oil and Gas Association, and most recently as the regional solicitor for Alaska for the U.S. Department of Interior. Now, when your state like mine is owned by over 60%, the federal government controls the land in Alaska. The solicitor for the U.S. Department of Interior position in Alaska is actually a really important one and is incredibly important in terms of the qualifications for a federal judge. This wide-ranging experience will be incredibly valuable, Madam President, as a district court judge in Alaska, because he is familiar, very familiar, with the numerous Alaska-specific laws that this body passes year after year, decade after decade. The Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Act. Madam President, this is an important point because very few states have such large, complex federal laws that are focused solely on their state. And federal courts often misinterpret these laws, don't understand these laws, to the detriment of the people I represent. Let me just give you a recent example. There was a federal case under the law I mentioned recently, a NILCA, as we call it in Alaska. It involved a moose hunter named John Sturgeon who had a hovercraft and wanted to go moose hunting, and overbearing federal government agents told him he couldn't use his hovercraft in certain areas considered federal waters. John Sturgeon, knew better. He challenged the federal government, 12 years of litigation, twice up to the U.S. Supreme Court, federal judges at the district and certainly the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals level getting this case wrong every single time. And finally, last year, in a unanimous 9-0 opinion, Justice Elena Kagan summed it up very succinctly when she ruled against all these federal judges in the Ninth Circuit and for Mr. Sturgeon when she said, if Sturgeon lived in any other state, his suit would not have had a prayer of success. She went on, except Sturgeon lives in Alaska. And as we have said before, Alaska is often the exception, not the rule under federal law. So the Supreme Court gets it, and Josh Kindred will get it. He understands Alaska's unique legal jurisprudence. He is committed to honoring the commitments this body has made to Alaskans' First Peoples and others in my great state, and he is committed to justice. I believe he will serve with honor and integrity on the federal court, and I urge my colleagues for a vote for his confirmation. I yield the floor.